The vast darkness of space stretched out before Grand Admiral Theron Var as he stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Vigilance. The viewports revealed the swirling nebulae and scattered asteroids of the Xerxes Belt, a relatively quiet border region that marked the outer reaches of the Ethelberg Empire. 10 millennia of imperial rule had brought stability, order, and a certain stagnation to the thousand systems under Ethelberg control. Var ran a hand through his silver-streaked dark hair, his weathered face reflecting both the wisdom of his 60 standard years and the weariness that came from decades of service to an increasingly ossified regime. The Empire still maintained technological superiority over the scattered autonomous worlds beyond its borders, but innovation had slowed to a crawl in recent centuries. New starship designs appeared perhaps once a generation now, and even those were merely incremental improvements on established templates. Status report. Var ordered, his deep voice carrying the authoritative tone expected of a Grand Admiral. Commander Boren Kale, his first officer, approached with a datapad. Kale was the perfect Imperial officer, rigidly adherent to protocol, born to a noble family with generational military service, and utterly convinced of the Empire's inherent superiority. His immaculate uniform and perfectly groomed appearance stood in contrast to Var's more practical approach to military decorum. "Nothing to report, sir," Kale said with satisfaction. "Border patrols have encountered no unauthorized vessels in the past 72 hours. The mining colony on Xerxes 4 has requested additional security for their next shipment, but that's scheduled for next week." Var nodded, suppressing a sigh. Another uneventful patrol in a career that had become increasingly defined by routine. He had once been a rising star, celebrated for tactical brilliance during the suppression of the Orion uprising 30 years prior. Now he felt like a museum piece, a relic of a more dynamic era when the Empire still faced meaningful challenges. His attention drifted to the crew pit below the command walkway. Junior officers monitored scanner arrays and communication systems with practiced efficiency. Among them was Lieutenant Alara Vance, a recent addition to his command staff. Despite graduating at the top of her class at the Imperial Academy, Vance had been struggling to advance due to her common birth. The Empire's rigid class structure valued lineage over competence, a philosophy Var had grown to quietly question over the years. The quiet hum of the bridge was suddenly interrupted by an urgent beep from Vance's console. The lieutenant's posture stiffened as she studied the readings, her fingers dancing across the controls with remarkable speed. "Sir," she called out, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her shoulders. "I'm detecting an anomalous object approaching from bearing 227 Mark 43. Commander Kale frowned, moving toward her station. "Probably another sensor ghost, Lieutenant. The Xerxes Belt is notorious for false readings." "No, sir," Vance replied firmly, not looking up from her console. "I've already run 3 diagnostic confirmations. This is real." Something in her tone caught Var's attention. He descended from the command walkway to her station. "What are we looking at, Lieutenant?" "Unknown, sir." Vance brought up a 3-dimensional tactical display. A single red dot moved across the star field at a trajectory that would bring it directly into Imperial space. Vessel configuration doesn't match any known design in our records. "Pirates? Smugglers?" Kale suggested dismissively. "Negative, sir." Vance's fingers continued to work the controls. "I've cross-referenced with all registered and suspected illegal vessel profiles. No match. And the speed." She paused, double-checking her readings. "The speed is unprecedented. It's traveling at a velocity that exceeds our fastest military vessels by approximately 237%. A chill ran down Var's spine. In his 4 decades of service, he had never encountered any ship, Imperial or otherwise, capable of such velocity. "Distance. Currently at the outer edge of our long-range sensors, sir. Approximately 2 million kilometers and closing rapidly." "Have they detected us?" Var asked, strategic calculations already forming in his mind. "Unknown, sir," but Vance hesitated, something Var had never seen her do before. "Sir, that ship's not in any records." And it's moving fast, impossibly fast. Var straightened, a long-dormant sense of alertness awakening within him. Sound General Quarters. Bring all weapon systems online, but do not target. Activate countermeasures and shields. Sir, Kale looks shocked. Protocol dictates radio silence when confronting an unknown entity until... I know the protocol, Commander, or cut him off. But protocol was written with the assumption that we would maintain technological superiority. That assumption may no longer be valid. Kale's face flushed, but he complied, relaying the orders to the crew. The lighting on the bridge shifted to the red hue of battle readiness as klaxons sounded throughout the massive vessel. Lieutenant Vance, Var turned back to the young officer. Continue monitoring. I want to know the moment anything changes. Yes, sir. Var moved to the Central Command console and activated a secure channel to Imperial High Command on Ethel Prime, the artificial planetary capital that served as the heart of the Empire. He knew his next actions would be scrutinized by the Admiralty and possibly even the Imperial Council itself. A wrong move could end his career, or worse, if the approaching vessel proved truly hostile. This is Grand Admiral Theron Var of the Imperial flagship Vigilance, he stated formally for the record. We have detected an unknown vessel approaching Imperial space at unprecedented velocity. I am declaring a Situation Alpha and request immediate reinforcement from the nearest battle groups. Transmitting sensor data now. He nodded to Lieutenant Vance, who initiated the data transfer. The bridge fell into tense silence as they waited for a response. Admiral, Vance spoke up after several minutes. I'm detecting a slight shift in the unknown vessel's energy signature. It may be preparing to... Before she could finish, the red dot on the tactical display vanished. Lost contact, she reported, fingers flying across her console. Attempting to re-establish. Did they detect our transmission? Var asked sharply. Impossible to determine, sir, but the timing suggests. The red dot reappeared, but now it was dramatically closer, barely 500,000 kilometers away. They've jumped, Vance announced, her professional composure cracking slightly. Some form of propulsion we've never seen before. Not standard hyperspace technology. Var felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Whatever this vessel was, it clearly possessed technology far beyond the Empire's understanding. The possibility that it represented a new, unknown power with superior capabilities sent a wave of dread through him. Not for himself, but for the billion worlds under Imperial protection. Incoming transmission from High Command, the communications officer announced. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Marshal Dren, the Emperor's senior military advisor. His expression was one of thinly veiled skepticism. Admiral Var, Dren began coldly. We've received your alert and data. Our analysts suggest you may be experiencing sensor malfunctions. The velocities you're reporting are theoretically impossible. Var maintained his composure. With respect, Marshal, our systems have been triple-checked. This is real. Even if it is, Dren replied dismissively, it's likely just an experimental vessel from one of the independent systems. Nothing that warrants a Situation Alpha declaration. Marshal, Var insisted, no independent system has the resources or technology to build something like this. We're dealing with something completely new. Before Dren could respond, Lieutenant Vance called out urgently, Admiral, the vessel has changed course again. It's now on a direct heading toward Corellia Restricted Zone. The Corellia Restricted Zone was less than a day's journey from Ethel Prime itself, the very heart of the Empire. Whatever this vessel was, it was heading straight for the most sensitive and protected region of Imperial space. Marshal Dren's expression finally showed concern. Hold your position, Admiral. We're dispatching Battle Group Epsilon to your coordinates. Do not engage unless directly threatened, but do not allow that vessel to proceed further into Imperial territory. Is that understood? Perfectly, Marshal, Var acknowledged as the transmission ended. Commander Kale approached, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by nervous tension. Your orders, sir? Var studied the tactical display. The mysterious vessel was maintaining its new course, still moving at that impossible speed. They had perhaps hours, not days, before it would reach the Corellia restricted zone. Set an intercept course, maximum sustainable speed, he ordered, and open all communication channels. If they can hear us, I want them to know we're trying to make contact. Sir, Kale protested. Radio silence protocols are meaningless in this situation. Var finished firmly. If they wanted to attack us, Commander, their technological advantage suggests they could have done so already. Let's not give them reason to start now. As the massive engines of the Vigilance powered up, Var returned his gaze to the view screen. For the first time in decades, he faced a genuine unknown, something beyond the Empire's understanding or control. It was terrifying, yes, but he couldn't deny the small spark of curiosity that had awakened within him. For better or worse, the stagnant peace of the Ethelberg Empire was about to be challenged. The next 12 hours aboard the Vigilance were a flurry of activity. Grand Admiral Var had ordered all systems at maximum readiness, with rotating crew shifts to ensure nobody grew fatigued. Lieutenant Vance had been promoted to acting tactical officer, much to Commander Kale's disapproval, but her insights into the strange vessel's movements had proven invaluable. Still no response to our communications, the comms officer reported, fatigue evident in his voice despite the stimulants being distributed to key personnel. Var nodded, unsurprised. They had been broadcasting peaceful greetings on all known frequencies for hours without result. Either the vessel couldn't hear them, couldn't understand them, or was deliberately ignoring them. None of those possibilities were particularly reassuring. Distance to Corellia restricted zone. At current speeds, the unknown vessel will cross the boundary in approximately 3 hours, Vance reported. Var grimaced. They were still 6 hours away from interception, and Battlegroup Epsilon was even further behind. The mysterious ship would reach restricted Imperial space long before they could physically intervene. His secure communication terminal chimed, indicating a priority transmission. Var stepped away from the bridge crew to take it privately. The holographic image that formed was not Marshal Dren this time, but Grand Marshal Chiton himself, the supreme military commander of all Imperial forces and a member of the ruling Imperial Council. Chiton's aristocratic features were set in a mask of cold fury. Admiral Var, he began without preamble, I have reviewed your situation. The Imperial Council is concerned. As am I, Grand Marshal, Var replied carefully. The vessel will reach the Corellia restricted zone before we can intercept. That cannot be allowed, Chiton stated flatly. The Council has authorized immediate and decisive action. You are to deploy long-range weaponry and destroy the intruder. Var blinked in surprise. Sir, we have no evidence of hostile intent. We haven't even established communication. Empire protocol mandates. The protocols exist to serve the Empire, not the other way around. Chiton cut him off sharply. That vessel represents unknown technology approaching our most sensitive region. Its very existence is a threat to Imperial security and supremacy. With respect, sir, Var persisted, a first contact situation requires diplomatic. This is not a request, Admiral. Chiton's voice dropped dangerously. This is a direct order from the Imperial Council. Destroy the vessel. Immediately. The transmission ended before Var could respond further. He stood motionless for a long moment, the weight of the order settling uncomfortably on his shoulders. In his 4 decades of service, he had never disobeyed a direct order, but he had also never been ordered to commit what might amount to an act of war against an unknown civilization without any attempt at peaceful resolution. He returned to the bridge, where expectant faces turned toward him. Sir, Commander Kale inquired. New orders? Var hesitated, then made his decision. Prepare a warning shot. Target a point 5,000 kilometers ahead of the unknown vessel's projected path. Full power, visible spectrum. Kale looked confused. A warning shot, sir? Not direct engagement. You have your orders, Commander, Var said firmly. As Kale moved to comply, Lieutenant Vance approached. Admiral, I've been analyzing the vessel's energy emissions. There's something you should see. She led him to her console, where a complex display of energy wavelengths scrolled across the screen. These patterns here and here, she indicated, they're not random. They're mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, and what appear to be atomic structure representations. Burst studied the display, understanding dawning. They've been communicating all along, just not in a form we recognized. Vance nodded. I believe so, sir. And there's more. The emissions changed when we began broadcasting. They may be studying our communications, trying to understand them. Before Var could respond, the weapons officer called out, "Warning shot ready, Admiral." Var looked back at the energy patterns on Vance's screen, then at the tactical display showing the mysterious vessel's position. Years of training and protocol pulled him in one direction, instinct and ethics in another. "Fire," he ordered quietly. The massive forward cannon of the Vigilance discharged a blinding beam of energy that sliced through space, deliberately missing the unknown vessel, but close enough to register as a clear warning. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then Lieutenant Vance called out, "Energy spike from the unknown vessel. It's the red dot representing the strange." Ship suddenly vanished from the tactical display. "Where did it go?" Var demanded. "Unknown, sir," Vance replied, frantically working her console. "It simply disappeared." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Had the vessel fled? Was it destroyed somehow by their warning shot? Or was it using technology they couldn't even detect to maneuver? "Sir," the sensor officer's voice cracked with alarm. "Contact, directly astern." The tactical display updated to show the red dot, now positioned behind the Vigilance, impossibly close. "Ow!" Commander Kale breathed, all protocol forgotten in his shock. "All weapons, hold fire," Var ordered sharply. "Defensive screens at maximum." "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the unknown vessel." On screen, Var ordered, straightening his uniform unconsciously. The main view screen flickered, then filled with an image that caused the entire bridge crew to fall silent in amazement. The being that appeared was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and slender, with pale bluish skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Its large, almond-shaped eyes held a depth of intelligence that was immediately apparent, and its features were elegantly proportioned in a way that seemed almost too perfect to be natural. "I am Lyra." The being spoke, its mouth movements not quite matching the flawless Imperial standard that emerged. Some kind of advanced translation technology, Var realized. Navigator of the Voyager vessel Enlightenment. "We come in peace, seeking knowledge exchange." Var stepped forward, aware that this moment would be recorded in Imperial history. "I am Grand Admiral Theron Var of the Ethelberg Empire. We apologize for our warning shot. Your vessel's capabilities are beyond our experience." Lyra's expression remained serene. "We understand caution when faced with the unknown. It is a universal trait among sentient species." The being paused, then added, "However, aggressive action is unnecessary. Had we intended harm, we possess the capability to render your weapons inoperative." The calm certainty with which this statement was delivered sent a chill through the bridge. There was no boasting in Lyra's tone, merely a statement of fact. "May I ask your purpose in entering our space?" Var inquired carefully. "We are Voyagers," Lyra explained. "We travel between galaxies, studying civilizations and sharing knowledge where appropriate. Your empire has reached a developmental stage that warrants observation." "Galaxies? Not systems or sectors, but entire galaxies?" Var struggled to comprehend the implications. The Empire had barely explored a fraction of their own galaxy. "Your technology is remarkable," he said diplomatically. "It is the result of 1,000,000 years of peaceful development," Lyra replied. "Your civilization has existed for merely 10,000 years, yet shows promise, despite tendencies toward hierarchical stagnation." Before Var could respond to this surprisingly accurate assessment, his secure terminal chimed again. "Excuse me a moment," he said to Lyra, who nodded gracefully. The face of Grand Marshal Chiton appeared once more, his expression now livid. "Admiral Var, Our sensors show you have not engaged the target. Instead, you appear to be communicating with it. Explain yourself. Sir, first contact has been established, VAR reported. They call themselves Voyagers and claim peaceful intentions. Their technology is far beyond. I don't care what they claim, Chiton snapped. Your orders were explicit. Destroy that vessel immediately, or I will have you relieved of command and replaced with someone who understands the importance of Imperial security. Grand Marshal, with respect, what you're asking could trigger an interstellar incident with a civilization possessing technology we can barely comprehend. That is precisely why they must be destroyed, Chiton hissed. The Empire cannot allow any power to possess superior technology. It undermines the very foundation of our authority. His eyes narrowed. You have 10 minutes to comply, Admiral, or face the consequences of treason. The transmission cut off abruptly. VAR turned back to find Lyra, still waiting patiently on the view screen, with an expression suggesting the Voyager had heard every word despite the supposedly secure channel. Your leadership fears what they do not understand, Lyra observed without judgment. This is also common among developing civilizations. VAR felt a flush of embarrassment. Grand Marshal Chiton does not speak for all of us, he said carefully, aware he was treading dangerously close to sedition. We have observed your empire for some time, Admiral VAR, Lyra continued. There is much potential, but also concerning patterns. Technological progress has slowed. Social mobility has decreased. Creative thinking is discouraged. These are symptoms of a civilization approaching. Stagnation. Lieutenant Vance stepped forward, unable to contain herself. You've been observing us? For how long? Lyra's attention shifted to her. Approximately 300 of your years. Your insights into our communication patterns were impressive, Lieutenant Ilara Vance. You represent the type of thinking your empire needs more of. Vance looked startled at being addressed by name, but also pleased at the recognition. Commander Kale, however, was less impressed. This is outrageous, he sputtered. This alien admits to spying on the Empire for centuries, and we're having a friendly chat. We observe, Commander Bourne Kale, Lyra corrected gently, as we observe thousands of developing civilizations across many galaxies. It is how we learn and determine when contact might be beneficial. Beneficial to whom? Kale demanded. Ideally, to both parties, Lyra replied. Though history suggests the less advanced civilization typically benefits more significantly from such exchanges. VAR's mind raced. The implications were staggering. If what Lyra said was true, the Voyagers possessed knowledge that could transform the Empire, perhaps end the technological stagnation that had increasingly concerned him and other forward-thinking leaders. But he also had less than 10 minutes before Chiton would likely order his removal, possibly even send Battle Group Epsilon to fire upon both the Voyager vessel and the Vigilance if necessary. Lyra, he said urgently, I must be frank. Our leadership is divided on how to respond to your arrival. Some, like Grand Marshal Chiton, see you as a threat to be eliminated. Others would welcome peaceful exchange. But right now, those who fear you hold power. Lyra nodded. We anticipated this reaction. It is why we approached openly rather than continuing our observations from afar. Your empire stands at a crossroads, Admiral. The path of fear leads to isolation and eventual collapse. The path of openness leads to growth and renewal. That's not your decision to make, Commander Kale interjected. The Imperial Council determines the Empire's path, not alien interlopers. Actually, Commander, VAR said quietly, every citizen of the Empire makes that choice in small ways every day, including us here now. He turned back to Lyra. If I may ask, what would you offer the Empire in exchange for peaceful relations? Knowledge, Lyra replied simply. Medical advances to extend your lifespans and eliminate diseases. Energy technologies that would end resource scarcity. Educational methods to unlock greater creative potential in your people. And what would you want in return? Vance asked. Cultural exchange. Art. Music. Literature. Philosophy. Lyra's expression softened. These are the truly unique elements of any civilization. The things we cannot develop independently, but must experience through others. A notification flashed on Var's console. 5 minutes remaining before Chiton's deadline. Admiral, Commander Kale said in a low voice, we have our orders. The Grand Marshal was explicitly clear. Var looked between Kale's rigid, fearful expression and Vance's hopeful one. Then he looked at Lyra, who waited with the patience of a being whose civilization had evolved over 1,000,000 years. In that moment, Theron Var made the most significant decision of his life. Lieutenant Vance, he said calmly, establish a secure channel to all Imperial vessels in this sector. Then access the Empire's emergency broadcast system. Vance's eyes widened in understanding. Yes, sir. What are you doing? Kale demanded, his hand moving toward his sidearm. Making a choice, Commander, Var replied, not taking his eyes off the console as Vance worked. The choice between fear and hope. Between stagnation and growth. He looked up at Lyra. Between isolation and connection. Admiral Var, Kale's voice hardened as he drew his weapon. I am relieving you of command under Article 15 of the Imperial Code. Stand down immediately. Several security officers on the bridge looked uncertainly between the Admiral and the Commander, clearly torn between chain of command and loyalty to Var. Channel established, Admiral, Vance announced, ignoring the weapon pointed in their direction. You're broadcasting to all Imperial forces in the sector and across all civilian frequencies on core worlds. Var nodded his thanks and took a deep breath. This is Grand Admiral Theron Var of the Imperial flagship Vigilance. What I am about to tell you violates multiple security protocols, but the future of our empire demands the truth. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Approximately 14 hours ago, we encountered a vessel of extraordinary capabilities, representing an advanced civilization called the Voyagers. They have offered peaceful contact and knowledge exchange. He continued, his voice gaining strength. However, elements within the Imperial Council, led by Grand Marshal Chiton, have ordered the destruction of the Voyager vessel without attempting meaningful dialogue. This order was given not out of concern for Imperial security, but out of fear that the technological superiority of the Voyagers threatens the established power structure. Behind him, he was dimly aware of security officers moving to subdue Commander Kale, who was shouting accusations of treason. I believe this represents a critical juncture for our civilization, Var continued. For centuries, we have grown increasingly stagnant. Innovation has slowed. Social mobility has decreased. The powerful remain powerful not through merit, but through the suppression of new ideas and talents. He glanced briefly at Lieutenant Vance. We can choose to continue down this path of fear and isolation, or we can embrace this opportunity to grow and evolve. Var straightened, meeting Lyra's gaze through the view screen. I hereby formally welcome the Voyagers to Ethelberg space and accept their offer of peaceful exchange. I call upon all Imperial citizens and forces to reject orders that would jeopardize this historic opportunity. The future of our civilization depends on the choices we make today. As he finished, the bridge fell silent. Var was acutely aware that he had likely just ended his career, possibly even his life if Chiton's faction prevailed. But for the first time in decades, he felt he had truly served the Empire's best interests. Incoming transmission from Battle Group Epsilon, the communications officer announced tensely. They're requesting clarification of orders, sir. They want to know if they should follow Grand Marshal Chiton's directive to fire upon both the Voyager vessel and the Vigilance. Before Var could respond, dozens of new transmissions began flooding in from other Imperial vessels, from planetary governors, from civilian leaders. The unexpected broadcast had sent shockwaves throughout the sector. It appears you have catalyzed quite a reaction, Admiral, Lyra observed. For better or worse, Var agreed grimly. Administrator Vex of Tangara Colony pledges support for Admiral Var, the comms officer reported, struggling to keep up with the influx. Governor Tellus of the Orion sector as well. 3 battle cruisers from the 4th Fleet are breaking formation with Battle Group Epsilon and moving to defensive positions around the Vigilance. Vance looked up from her console, eyes shining. "It's working, Admiral. They're listening." Var cautioned. "But Chiton controls significant forces, and he will not surrender power easily." As if on cue, a new transmission cut through the others. Grand Marshal Chiton's face appeared, contorted with rage. "Var, you treasonous fool," he snarled. "You have no idea what you've done. The alien vessel is a threat to everything we've built. I am dispatching the full might of the Imperial fleet to your position with orders to destroy both the alien ship and any Imperial vessels that stand with you. You would start a civil war rather than consider peaceful contact?" Var asked incredulously. "I would preserve the Empire against all threats, internal and external," Chiton replied coldly. "Your naivety has revealed you as both." The transmission cut off abruptly. Var turned to Lyra, who had observed the exchange with that same serene expression. "I apologize for involving you in our internal politics," Var said. "This was not my intention. Evolution is rarely smooth, Admiral," Lyra replied philosophically. "Civilizations, like living organisms, often experience periods of stress before adaptation occurs." "That's a polite way of saying we're about to have a civil war," Vance commented dryly. "Perhaps," Lyra acknowledged. "Or perhaps a moment of clarity. We have observed that pivotal individuals can sometimes shift a civilization's trajectory at critical junctures." The Voyagers studied Var thoughtfully. "You may be such an individual. I'm just a military officer trying to do what's right," Var demurred. "Which is precisely why your words carry weight," Lyra pointed out. "You speak not from ambition, but from conviction." The tactical officer interrupted urgently. "Admiral, multiple hyperspace signatures detected. Imperial vessels emerging at coordinates spanning the sector." Var moved to the tactical display. Dozens of Imperial warships were appearing throughout the region, some clearly aligned with Chiton, others positioning themselves with the growing coalition supporting Var's stance. It was potentially the largest deployment of Imperial forces since the Orion uprising decades earlier. "Will your vessel be safe?" Var asked Lyra with genuine concern. "Chiton's forces will target you first." "We have defensive capabilities," Lyra assured him. "No Imperial weapons can harm our vessel. However, we will not engage offensively. That is not our way." "Admiral," Vance called out, "transmission from the Sovereign, flagship of the 3rd Fleet. Admiral Tello wishes to speak with you." Var nodded. Tello was an old friend and a respected veteran. Her support could prove decisive. The weathered face of Admiral Helena Tella appeared on a secondary screen. "Theron, you always did have a flair for the dramatic," she said with a hint of grim humor. "The 3rd Fleet stand with you. Chiton has overreached this time." "Thank you, Helena," Var replied with genuine relief. "The situation is volatile. Chiton is deploying everything he can." "I'm aware," Tella nodded. "Half the fleet is choosing sides as we speak. But your broadcast reached the civilian leadership too. The Imperial Senate is convening an emergency session. There are calls for Chiton's removal." A flicker of hope ignited in Var's chest. The Senate had been increasingly sidelined in recent decades, but it still held constitutional authority. "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted again, "lead elements of Chiton's forces are taking offensive positions. Energy signatures indicate weapons charging. Time to see if this fragile coalition holds," Var murmured. "All allied vessels, defensive formations. Do not fire unless fired upon." The bridge crew worked with focused intensity, coordinating with the growing alliance of ships rallying to Var's cause. Minutes stretched into a tense hour as more vessels arrived, choosing sides in what might become the first Imperial Civil War in millennia. "Admiral," the sensor officer suddenly called out. Massive energy surged from the Voyager vessel. Var turned to the view screen, where Lyra still observed. "What's happening?" "A demonstration," Lyra replied calmly. "Observe." A soft, golden light emanated from the Voyager ship, expanding in a perfect sphere. As it touched the nearest Imperial vessels, those loyal to Chiton that had been preparing to attack, Their weapon systems and engines immediately went offline. Ship after ship was rendered effectively inert, floating harmlessly in space. Their weapons and propulsion systems have been temporarily neutralized, Lyra explained. No permanent damage has been done, and life support remains functional. They will regain control in approximately 6 hours. The bridge crew stared in amazement. With a single action, the Voyagers had neutralized hundreds of Imperial warships without firing a shot or causing a single casualty. "That's impossible," someone whispered. "Not impossible," Lyra corrected gently. "Simply beyond your current understanding." Ver studied the tactical display, where nearly half the Imperial fleet now floated powerless. "You could have done this at any time," he realized. "Yes," Lyra acknowledged. "But it was important that your people make their own choices first. Had we intervened immediately, fear would have only increased." "And now?" Var asked. "Now, perhaps, there could be dialogue without the immediate threat of violence." As if in confirmation, a priority transmission came through from Ethel Prime itself. The lined face of Senate Chairwoman Vestra appeared, her expression grave but determined. "Admiral Var," she began formally, "the Senate has convened an emergency session and reviewed your transmission. We have also witnessed the demonstration of Voyager capabilities." She paused. "The Senate has voted to remove Grand Marshal Kyton from command, pending investigation into his actions. You are hereby authorized to establish peaceful relations with the Voyagers on behalf of the Ethelberg Empire." Var bowed slightly. "Thank you, Chairwoman. I will endeavor to serve the Empire's best interests." "See that you do, Admiral," Vestra replied, a hint of warmth breaking through her formal demeanor. "Perhaps it's time for some fresh thinking after all." The transmission ended. Lieutenant Vance approached, barely containing her excitement. "It worked, sir. You actually did it." "We've only begun, Lieutenant," Var cautioned, though he couldn't entirely suppress a smile. Establishing initial contact is far simpler than building a lasting relationship, especially with centuries of Imperial isolationism to overcome. He turned back to Lyra. "On behalf of the Ethelberg Empire, I formally welcome you and propose we begin discussions on cultural and knowledge exchange." Lyra inclined her head gracefully. "We accept, Admiral Var. This marks the beginning of a new era for your civilization, one of many such beginnings we have witnessed across the cosmos." The Voyager's expression softened slightly. "The path ahead will not be easy. Change rarely is. But we believe your people have the potential for greatness beyond the limitations you have placed upon yourselves." As arrangements were made for formal delegations and secure communication channels, Var found himself standing beside Lieutenant Vance at the viewport, gazing at the sleek, otherworldly form of the Voyager vessel. "Everything changes from here, doesn't it?" Vance asked quietly. "Yes," Var replied, watching as the first light of a distant star broke over the curve of a nearby planet. "For better or worse, nothing will be the same again." "For better," Vance said with conviction. "It has to be for better." Var smiled at her optimism. "Perhaps you're right, Lieutenant. After 10,000 years, perhaps it's time for a new dawn." As if in answer, the Voyager vessel shimmered slightly, its surface reflecting the starlight in patterns that seemed almost musical in their harmony. A new beginning indeed, Var thought, not just for the Empire, but perhaps for humanity's understanding of its place in a much larger, more wondrous universe than they had ever imagined. 3 months after the historic first contact, Grand Admiral Theron Var stood in the newly constructed Exchange Hall on Ethel Prime. The vast circular chamber had been designed specifically for meetings between Imperial officials and the Voyagers, with architecture that blended traditional Imperial grandeur with elements inspired by the elegant simplicity of Voyager aesthetics. The past months had been tumultuous. Kyton and his most ardent supporters had been removed from power, but they still commanded loyalty among conservative factions who viewed the rapid changes with suspicion and fear. Protests had erupted on several worlds, some peaceful, others requiring military intervention. The Transition Council, hastily formed to manage the unprecedented situation and led reluctantly by Var himself, worked tirelessly to maintain stability while pursuing the opportunities presented by the Voyagers. "Nervous, Admiral?" "Lieutenant, now Captain," Elara Vance asked as she approached. Her promotion had been one of Var's first acts after being confirmed as head of the Transition Council, a move that had raised eyebrows among traditionalists but sent a clear message about the direction of the new leadership. Cautiously optimistic, Var replied with a small smile. "The medical technology exchange begins today. If it's as revolutionary as the Voyagers claim, it could transform healthcare throughout the Empire. Based on the preliminary data, revolutionary might be an understatement," Vance said. "Their regenerative techniques alone could extend the average Imperial lifespan by decades." Var nodded, aware of the complex implications. Extended lifespans would eventually require social restructuring, new approaches to resource allocation, perhaps even expansion to new systems. Change bred change in unpredictable ways. The massive doors at the far end of the hall parted, and Lyra entered, accompanied by several other Voyagers. Though they had been present on Ethel Prime for months now, the sight of them still caused a hush to fall over the assembled Imperial dignitaries and scientists. Admiral Var, Lyra, greeted him warmly. "Captain Vance, it is good to see you again." "The honor is ours," Var replied, following the protocol that had been established for these exchanges. "We are prepared to receive the medical knowledge you have offered to share." Lyra gestured to one of her companions, who stepped forward carrying what appeared to be a simple crystalline sphere. "This contains the complete data package we discussed. Your scientists will find it compatible with Imperial systems, though some of the concepts may require new approaches to understand fully." The Imperial Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Senevaler, accepted the sphere with barely concealed eagerness. "We've assembled teams across all major medical disciplines to begin implementation immediately," she assured Lyra. "Patience will be required," Lyra cautioned. "Rushing implementation without full understanding could lead to complications. We will provide advisory support as needed." As the medical teams moved to a separate chamber to begin their work, Lyra turned to Var. "There is another matter we wish to discuss, Admiral. Perhaps somewhere more private." Intrigued, Var led Lyra and Vance to a smaller adjacent room designed for confidential conversations. Once they were seated, Lyra's expression grew more serious than Var had ever seen it. "We have detected concerning developments in a neighboring sector," the Voyager began. "A species known to us as the Nexus has begun expansion activities that may eventually bring them to Imperial space." Var straightened. "A military threat?" "Not in the immediate future," Lyra clarified. "The Nexus are currently over 200 light-years from your borders, but they are expansionist by nature and possess technology approximately 50 years beyond current Imperial capabilities. That's significantly behind your own technology," Vance noted. "Yes," Lyra acknowledged. "We have had limited interactions with the Nexus in the past. They are not hostile by nature, but they are resource-hungry and somewhat indifferent to the sovereignty of less advanced civilizations." "Why are you telling us this now?" Var asked carefully. "Because part of true exchange is sharing concerns as well as benefits," Lyra replied. "The Ethelberg Empire has existed in relative isolation for millennia. That era is ending, whether through contact with us or eventually with others. We believe it is better that you be prepared." Var considered this information thoughtfully. "And would your people assist if this Nexus species eventually reached our space?" "Our policy is one of non-intervention in direct conflicts," Lyra explained. "However, we can provide knowledge that would help you advance your defensive capabilities, should you choose to use it responsibly." The implication was clear. The Voyagers were offering to accelerate Imperial technological development, but only if convinced it would be used for defense rather than conquest. "I understand," Var said, "and I appreciate your candor. We'll need to discuss this with the full Transition Council, of course." "Of course," Lyra agreed. "There is no immediate urgency. The Nexus expansion occurs over decades, not months. But awareness now allows for preparation." As they were about to rejoin the main gathering, alarms suddenly blared throughout the complex. Var's communication device activated automatically. "Admiral," a security officer's tense voice reported, We have a situation. Armed protesters have breached the outer perimeter of the exchange complex. They're demanding an end to Voyager influence. Var exchanged a concerned glance with Vance. Casualties? None yet, sir. Security forces are containing them, but they're well organized. Intelligence suggests possible connections to former Marshal Kyton supporters. I'm on my way, Var responded, then turned apologetically to Lyra. I'm afraid there's an incident requiring my attention. We are aware, Lyra replied calmly. Your security systems already alerted us. Please attend to it as needed. As Var and Vance moved quickly toward the security center, Vance spoke quietly. 3 months in, and we're still facing resistance. Will it ever stop? Change is difficult, Var reminded her. We're asking people to reconsider beliefs and assumptions that have gone unchallenged for generations. Some will never accept it. The security center was a hub of controlled chaos, with officers tracking the protesters' movements on multiple displays. The chief of security, a veteran named Commander Davin, briefed them quickly. Approximately 200 protesters breached the outer gardens using stolen security credentials. They're well armed, but so far have fired only warning shots. They claim to represent something called the Pure Empire Movement and are demanding all Voyagers leave Imperial space immediately. Ver studied the security feeds. The protesters were indeed disciplined, moving with military precision. This isn't a spontaneous demonstration. It's a coordinated operation. Agreed, sir, Davin nodded. And the timing is suspicious, coinciding exactly with the medical technology exchange. They want to disrupt the process, Vance realized. If they can create enough chaos, maybe even harm some of the Voyagers. It would set back everything we've worked for, Var finished grimly. Options, Commander? Davin outlined several tactical approaches, none particularly appealing. Direct confrontation risked casualties and would play into the protesters' hands by creating martyrs. Negotiation might legitimize their extremist views. A waiting game could allow the situation to escalate unpredictably. Before Var could decide, a soft chime indicated a communication from the exchange hall. Lyra's serene face appeared on a secondary screen. Admiral, we sense your dilemma, the Voyager said. May I offer a suggestion? Please, Var replied, ignoring the surprised looks from some of the security personnel at the ease with which the Voyagers had accessed supposedly secure channels. Allow me to address them directly, Lyra proposed. No security forces, no weapons. Just words. That's far too dangerous, Vance protested immediately. These people hate everything you represent. Fear is not hate, Captain Vance, Lyra corrected gently. It is simply fear. And fear can be addressed through understanding. Var considered the unexpected proposal. It was risky, potentially disastrous, if the protesters genuinely intended violence. Yet the Voyagers had consistently demonstrated capabilities beyond Imperial understanding. Perhaps they saw something in this situation that he couldn't. Very well, he decided finally. But I'll accompany you. Despite multiple objections from his security team, Var joined Lyra in the main courtyard of the exchange complex. The protesters had established a perimeter approximately 50 meters away, their weapons clearly visible but not directly aimed at the building. Are you certain about this? Var asked quietly as they walked together toward the protest line. Violence is rarely the optimal solution to misunderstanding, Lyra replied. And we have observed that courage in the face of fear often creates unexpected opportunities. As they approached, a tense silence fell over the protesters. Their leader, a hard-faced man with military bearing, stepped forward. That's close enough, he called out, raising a hand to halt them about 10 meters from the protest line. I am Lyra, representative of the Voyagers, Lyra announced, her voice carrying clearly across the space. And I believe you have concerns you wish to express. The leader seemed momentarily disconcerted by the direct approach. We don't recognize your authority here, alien. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years without outside interference. We demand you leave our space immediately. I understand your concern, Lyra replied with genuine empathy. Change can be frightening, especially when it challenges long-held beliefs about one's place in the universe. This isn't about fear, the man retorted. It's about sovereignty and security. Your presence undermines both. Does knowledge undermine sovereignty? Lyra asked thoughtfully. Does extending lifespans threaten security? These are the gifts we offer, not dominance but opportunity. The man hesitated, clearly unprepared for philosophical debate rather than confrontation. Taking advantage of the moment, Var stepped forward. I fought for the Empire for 4 decades, he said, projecting his voice to reach not just the leader but all the protesters. I bled for it. I believed in its mission to bring order and security to our people. That hasn't changed. He paused, looking directly at various faces in the crowd. What has changed is our understanding of our place in the galaxy. We aren't alone, and we aren't at the pinnacle of development. We can choose to reject that reality and cling to comfortable illusions, or we can embrace it and grow stronger. A murmur ran through the protesters, some nodding in grudging respect for the veteran admiral, others unmoved. Pretty words, the leader replied, though with less conviction than before. But actions matter more. How do we know these aliens won't simply replace one form of control with another? You don't, Lyra acknowledged surprisingly. Trust must be earned through consistent action over time. We ask not for blind faith, but for the opportunity to demonstrate our intentions through deeds. She gestured to the medical center visible through the courtyard windows. Even now, the knowledge we have shared will begin saving Imperial lives within days. Judge us by the results, not by fear of what might be. The standoff continued for several tense moments. Then, unexpectedly, an elderly man pushed through from the back of the protest group. His Imperial military uniform was old but meticulously maintained, the insignia indicating a veteran of significant rank. I know you, he said, addressing her directly. You led the 3rd Fleet action at Orion during the uprising. My son served under you. You brought him home when others would have sacrificed his division. Ver studied the man's face, memory clicking into place. Lieutenant Commander Torin, tactical officer on the Defiant. The old man nodded, surprised and pleased to be remembered. My son said you always put the welfare of the Empire and its people above politics. If you believe these Voyagers offer us something valuable, I'm inclined to listen. This unexpected endorsement seemed to affect the protesters more than any security measure could have. The unified front began to fragment as individuals engaged in hushed conversations, uncertainty replacing the earlier conviction. The leader, sensing his control slipping, made a last desperate attempt. They'll change everything. The Empire, as we know it, will cease to exist. Yes, Ver agreed calmly. It will evolve, as all living things must. The question is whether that evolution will be guided by wisdom and courage, or by fear and dogma. After a tense moment, the old veteran turned to the protest leader. I'm leaving, Jaren, and I suggest others do the same. This isn't the way to honor what the Empire stands for. One by one, then in groups, protesters began to lower their weapons and step back. Not all. Some remained defiantly in place, but enough that the imminent threat dissipated like morning mist under the rising sun. As security forces moved in to peacefully escort the remaining protesters from the complex, returned to Lyra with newfound respect. You knew this would happen. I calculated it as a probable outcome, Lyra corrected. Your people are not monolithic in their thinking, Admiral. Fear is powerful, but so is hope, and the desire to be part of something greater than oneself. They walked back toward the exchange hall, where Vance waited with a mixture of relief and amazement. That could have gone very differently, she remarked. Indeed, Lyra agreed. The future is never certain. It is shaped by countless choices, large and small. The Voyager glanced at Var. But some individuals, at crucial moments, can influence those choices more significantly than others. As they rejoined the medical exchange, already in progress, Var found himself reflecting on everything that had transpired since that first detection of an unknown vessel moving impossibly fast through Xerxes' belt. In just 3 months, the foundations of Imperial society had been shaken, some crumbling away, others strengthening, new ones beginning to form. The path ahead remained uncertain. Conservative elements, like the protesters today, would continue to resist. Resource allocation challenges would emerge as new technologies were implemented. The political structure of the empire would need to evolve to accommodate more open and dynamic interactions with the wider galaxy. And looming in the distant future, the Nexus expansion presented both a challenge and an opportunity for the empire to define its new identity. Yet for all these challenges, Var felt something he had not experienced in decades: genuine hope. The stagnation that had gripped the empire was breaking. New voices like Vance's were being heard. Knowledge was flowing rather than being hoarded. As he watched Imperial scientists and Voyager representatives working side by side, the Admiral allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps Vance had been right after all. Change was coming to the 1,000-year Ethelberg Empire, and it would indeed be for the better. The future beckoned, vast and unknown, but no longer to be feared.